Hey there, this is Rob from Southgate Media Group. The following podcast was recorded during the SMG Podcast Marathon at Indy PopCon 2018 in Indianapolis, Indiana. This podcast marathon was 10 hours long and featured 19 podcasts covering a wide variety of geek-centric topics. Before we jump into the episode, I want to thank our amazing sponsors for this SMG Podcast Marathon. Without you, it would not have been nearly as cool. Links to our sponsors can be found in the show notes and at our website, southgatemediagroup.com. First of all, thank you to Tango Comics for the exceptional event poster. Thanks to our banner sponsors, Passionerdly Podcasts, Tome Travelers Podcast, Kinda Nerdy News with KJ Podcast, Movie Madness Podcast, Ed Maudlin and the Maudlin Realty Group, Very Dark, Very Quick Podcast, Advanced TV Herstory Podcast, Seriously? Let's Play Podcast, Dice Voyeurs Podcast, The Masks of Nythralothtop Podcast, The CritShow Podcast, The Amazing LARP, Chronicles of the Realm, Midnight Matinees Podcast, The Blue Box Café in Elgin, Illinois, Otherworld Theater in Chicago, Illinois, the This Week in Geek Podcast, live at the Blue Box Podcast, the Binge-worthy Podcast, and SMG Microcons. A special thanks to the Bonus Hours Podcast Network for sponsoring our free charging station. There would have been a lot of dead devices without your support. And finally, thanks to the sponsors of our program, the Bonus Hours Podcast Network, featuring the podcast Between the Profound and Profane, Kinda Nerdy News with KJ, The Crit Show, an actual play podcast, Very Dark, Very Quick, the podcast, Passionerdly.com, featuring the podcasts Dice Voyeurs and Tome Travelers, the Kevin Long Show podcast, and finally, the upcoming book, Pod Life, Podcaster's Stories. And there we go, the plugs are done. Enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, we want to welcome you back to, it's the first ever live episode of the Movie Madness Podcast. I'm your host, Doug, and I'm joined once again by my co-host, Mr. Jeremy.
Hello, PopCon.
You know, Jeremy, what's funny is I say Mr. Jeremy every time. Do you know why I do that?
From the Matrix, Mr. Anderson.
Yes, you're my Mr. Anderson every single episode.
That's right.
But we're down a person right now. We're missing Craig, our movie maniac. Craig couldn't be here.
And I will not do his little cackle during the intro. I cannot do it. That's left just for the movie maniac himself, Craig.
Yeah, but we've got a good show for you guys tonight. And the thing is, as we've been talking, we've got so many great movies that have come out. We've had Avengers Infinity War. We've had Black Panther. Last year we had Star Wars, Rogue One. You know, every year the box office gets higher and higher. And everybody says this is the greatest year in movies. And I kind of don't agree with that. Do you?
No, it's almost like we have too many movies nowadays. Back when we were younger, we think of maybe 5 or 6 movies for that year that we can count and remember seeing that were really big enough to hold our attention. But nowadays, it seems like there's blockbuster every single weekend that they're trying to put out, and it almost takes away from the blockbuster. It's not what it used to be anymore. Although billions and billions of dollars later, Avengers says, yeah, it still means something.
Yeah, it almost seems like that they give it that 2-week window. And so no one wants to be around it. So we seem to lose 2 weeks every single month from blockbuster to blockbuster. Right. And it just it takes the amount of movies you get to see down, and it kind of diminishes it to the fact of there's nothing in between, and sometimes it's the movies that are in between that make it actually a great year.
Yeah, and there was something too about planning and getting ready for a movie to be released. You knew something was coming out a year later. You pretty much had that whole month, like you said, to see that one movie because that was pretty much the biggest movie out at that time. Nowadays, if you don't look out, Black Panther is going to follow it 2 weeks later, followed by Avengers, and then Solo just came out. I mean, so it's amazing that some of these movies are doing the amount of money they're doing with so many blockbusters following them up. I mean, Jurassic World Part 2 is just around the corner, so...
And in some ways, it takes us down. I mean, I as we've been doing this podcast since 2012, I can remember each week being like amazed and super happy to, like, I can't wait to go see the movie. And now I'm actually kind of getting jaded a little bit because there are so many blockbusters that come year after year after, month after month after month, that it hits you and you're like, next thing you know, like I didn't get to see Solo until yesterday.
Right.
2 years ago, I would have been there opening night or first weekend, and it's kind of knocked it down.
Yeah, it's hard. I remember standing in line opening night for the midnight showing for Spider-Man, and it just seems like so many more of these blockbuster showings are happening. It's kind of hard to be there for every single one, every single week.
It is.
The next big movie, but we're complaining from all the spoils that we have. We're whining.
Yeah, I mean, we complain about going to movies every weekend, and
I would have killed for all these superhero comic book movies when I was a kid, month after month. I mean, now I'm living in my dream world, and now we're complaining. Now there's just too many of them.
Yeah. It's, once again, I'm get off my lawn guy.
Right.
I'm complaining about it. But what made us think about this is, with all these big movies releasing, we kind of decided, let's look back and try to decide what is the greatest year in movies. And now we normally do top fives, but we figured for this shorter format, we're going to try to drop it down to a top 3 years of all time. And it's our in a lot of ways, it's our favorite.
Yeah, it's our favorite years.
It's all judgmental. You can't always be right. Craig, always right.
Craig's always right. So I think I have one pick in his line of thought. So I'm representing Craig today.
You're representing Craig?
Just on one.
Okay. So why don't you start off? What's the first year you've selected?
All right. For my number 3 year in movies, I'm picking 1986. And now a lot of this is the product of when we grew up. I mean, our younger years, our teenage years were spent in the 80s. So, I mean, some of these blockbusters, they just hold so much weight in our memories. And 1986 was just huge for me. I mean, you had Top Gun that year. That was a big year. You had Ferris Bueller's Day Off, another great movie. Three Amigos, Aliens, a great sci-fi movie. But a couple of them that you might not think of right away are the reasons why this is one of my favorite years. And they're not necessarily the best movies of all time, but Big Trouble in Little China with Kurt Russell. I just love that movie. It's pure camp. It's so much fun. And it takes a spin on the hero and his sidekick, because who you think is the hero in this movie is actually the sidekick when you sit back and you look at everything that transpires. And then you have Highlander, maybe not the greatest of movies, but a great concept. With there can be only one.
Mm-hmm. But yet there's 4 movies that they've made in the series.
And then Karate Kid 2. And I'm one of the few people that enjoy Karate Kid 2 more than Karate Kid 1. I just love the Okinawa scene. I love the Mr. Miyagi and the Daniel-san. All of that in that movie. It just means a little bit more. But I'm going with 1986 as my first pick. And one of Doug's favorites, I say Top Gun, he automatically usually says Iron Eagle. And Iron Eagle was also that year, but I'm going to stick with the Top Gun.
When we just did a top 5 soundtracks of the 80s. We've been working on it. We're not all the way through. And when going back and looking at it, comparing Top Gun and Iron Eagle, I almost feel bad because I went back and was watching it. And, you know that when they made that, they were like, okay, guys, we've got a great movie coming out. And they're like, oh, Top Gun? Oh, no.
Kenny Loggins?
Don't release this movie.
And it's just in time for the news of Top Gun 2 coming out with Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer coming back, and Kenny Loggins re-recording Danger Zone. I don't know why, just use the original one.
Yeah, use the original.
Perfect time.
Now, when you're talking Big Trouble in Little China, it made me... I had read that they're talking about a reboot of it with The Rock.
With The Rock.
I think he can do it.
He can. He's won me over his last few movies. He's just got so much character and charisma. He's just fun to watch, and he doesn't take himself so seriously, and that's why I'm becoming a big Rock fan. So
I am. I didn't want to see Jumanji. I once again, get off my lawn, guy. I was like, no, don't touch my Jumanji. And then when it came out, I finally sat down and see it, and I loved The Rock in it, but Jack Black is what really,
he was really good.
It stole it. Yep. It stole the show for me. Just the whole part, and you know how there's Jack Black in little bitty doses is usually what I can take. But I mean, he was probably to me the best part of it.
Oh yeah, well. I enjoyed The Rock and Kevin Hart. I like those two together. But you're right, Jack Black playing the girl trapped in the man's body was hilarious. I mean, some of the little eye rolls he did and some of the lines he said. The fact that I'm not Instagramming this right now is insane.
Yes,
I love all of that. So what's your number 3 pick?
Okay, my number 3, and this. Okay, this is one that's going to kind of embarrass me a little bit, and it's really for the right reasons. It's I don't always pick quality, but sometimes I pick just pure fun. And I'm going to go with 1996, and because 96 to me was the year of the kind of like a blockbuster that just, let's call it, I don't want to call it a throwaway action movie, but I want to call it the action movies that are just fun. And like even to this day, I'll watch them over and over again. And you've got Independence Day. I mean, it's Will Smith when he broke. I mean, this is the movie that gave him his big start into being a huge star. Twister.
Yeah,
with the extreme Bill Paxton. Gosh, I miss him. When somebody passes away, I mean, I'm always sad about actors passing away.
Right.
But he's one of those guys that no matter what movie he was in, I always liked him, and I always had fun watching him. So I'm always sad to see that he's not there.
And you can't go wrong with Chet from Weird Science. So.
Once again, Doug brings the show down, talking about somebody dying.
I know. Don't do that.
No, on top of it, then you got the Rock with Nicolas Cage, and I mean. I love Nicolas Cage because he always goes for it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, now he seems to only go for it in lesser movies.
Right.
If we could just give him a shot with something that mattered, put him in something big, it would be good.
Like Ghost Rider.
You had to bring Ghost Rider into this. There's things I like in Ghost.
Don't dig the hole any deeper.
Oh my God, I'm once again. Yeah, but. And the only but that ends up is being me because I pick these dumb movies. But in 96, I'll at least come out and give you a little bit of quality for 96. And Primal Fear with Richard Gere, Edward Norton. It's Edward Norton's first movie that he was ever in. I mean, the first time they cast him, and he's young, and he plays this young guy that's been accused of murder that they find out has multiple personalities. And Aaron is the good guy, and Roy's the bad guy, and he keeps switching back and forth between the two. And Richard Gere is this hotshot lawyer that only takes the case because he wants to get even more famous off of it. And you talk about turns at the end of a movie, and I'm not going to spoil it for you guys because it is just an amazing turn on what happens. He is perfect in this, and it's what really made me start to love Edward Norton as an actor because if that's his first role, it just doesn't get any better than that. And then my other pick to give me some quality to equal out with all my Doug Shiny stuff, I'm going to go with Sling Blade. I mean, Billy Bob Thornton as Carl, and Lucas Black as I can't remember the kid's name.
I can't remember his name.
But such a great character, and if you ever get a chance, you might have to YouTube it. There's a sizzle reel or a short that they did. It's basically the opening scene of Sling Blade where they go in to interview Carl. If you see that, Molly Ringwald plays the girl that goes in to interview him, and you really can see the difference between what they were originally starting to pitch. And not that it's not that much different, but you see how Billy Bob Thornton has zeroed in on the role, and all of a sudden Carl gets heart. And that's what I love. And once again, a turn in a movie.
Right.
Not wanting to give anything away, but as you go through and see the relationship on how Carl bonds with him, and you get your guard down on him, and then when you can see the kind of turn that he has, I mean, I'm not one of those guys who will always say I love great acting or whatever. And the fact that you look at Billy Bob Thornton and it's not Billy Bob Thornton.
No.
I mean, you could put a picture up in front of him now and you're going to go, who is that?
Right.
I mean, that's
well,
how
you
good
see
it
him
was.
in Tombstone also standing there getting slapped around by Wyatt Earp, and you don't think Billy Bob Thornton at that point. So he's really transformed over the years.
We have to check a box because we just mentioned Tombstone again.
That's right, Tombstone. Always have to mention Tombstone.
All right, what do you got next, Jeremy?
All right, this is my year that I'm picking, that I'm representing Craig, and I'm going with 1939. It's hard not to mention this year when you're talking about some of the best movie years of all time, because you have the two big ones, of course, was Gone with the Wind with Clark Gable and Vivien Leigh, and then you have The Wizard of Oz with Judy Garland, and those are just timeless movies. The soundtracks were great. I mean, so many songs from The Wizard of Oz. I mean, even kids nowadays who probably haven't even seen the movie, they know these songs in some way, or at least have heard it. But there's a couple other movies that year that really stood out to me. Stagecoach with John Wayne. It's one of the greatest Westerns of all time, and so many Westerns have pulled from this movie. It's just enhancing this year, along with Goodbye, Mr. Chips, who Robert Donat has won the Best Acting Award that year. And I keep saying Clark Gable was so great in Gone with the Wind. It's hard not to give that Oscar to him, but if you go back and watch Goodbye, Mr. Chips in 1939, the performance Robert Donat had was really good, and it really won me over. I went in with a kind of a sour note, thinking there's no way this is going to be better than Gable and Gone with the Wind, and sure enough, I was like, okay, I can see why they gave it to him. And another one I'm just going to throw out there, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington with Jimmy Stewart, a really good movie, but later, actually right before I watched it, I had heard that Gary Cooper was actually in line to play this role as Mr. Smith, and the whole time I'm watching this movie, I'm seeing Jimmy Stewart, but the way he's acting and the lines he's giving, I'm thinking, this really would have been better for Gary Cooper. It's a really good movie, but if you think about the way Gary Cooper acts, kind of the slow drawl, he really looks like he has to think things out because he plays somebody that doesn't come across as like the smartest of men. He would have fit perfectly in this movie, but it's still a really good movie. And I'm going to throw Dodge City out there just because I love Errol Flynn, Olivia de Havilland, another Robin Hood connection. They were in Robin Hood together. And if you want to see one of our presidents, Ronald Reagan, he was also in Dodge City. Another good Western. So 1939, hopefully Craig's happy that I threw one of these older years out for him.
When you say Ronald Reagan as president, I always think of Back to the Future. The actor?
The actor?
You know, honestly, I haven't seen, you know,
Right,
me,
right.
I shy away from the older movies other than Wizard of Oz. And
Right.
I always think when we talk Wizard of Oz, I'm always drawn to the fact of what it would be like to have seen that in the theater for the first time. And what gets me is having Craig on the show, which Craig always talks about, is he didn't get to see it in the theater when he was young. So the only time he got to see it was on TV. And then it was only in black and white because they didn't have color TVs then.
Right.
And what gets me, you know, we take for granted getting to see that color. And when you only see stuff in black and white, and then to have that moment where everything comes in color, it's just amazing. And the fact that they built such a great world is what really gets to me. And then it's, you know, it sneaks in the musical on you. For somebody
Right.
like me, you know, they sneak up on me with a musical, and I'm like, I don't like musicals one bit. And then next thing you know, I'm humming along. I mean, we use part of it in our opening for the show.
Yep.
And it's just a timeless classic, and it still looks. You get a Blu-ray of it. It looks amazing now, just as much. And I'll get my Disney rant out about the great movie ride going away and us losing the Wizard of Oz section of
that's
the great
upsetting.
movie ride.
But on higher notes, what's your number two?
Okay, my number two, I'm going to go with 1987. And, you know, you look at the top of 1987, and you got 3 Men and a Baby, Fatal Attraction, Beverly Hills Cop 2, Good Morning America, Good Morning Vietnam. To me, it doesn't seem, you know, on first glance, you're saying, it's not that. But then go down further, and you find The Princess Bride.
Great movie.
Predator. And I love Predator because to me it's really one of those great sci-fi movies that and action together, because it's almost it's amazing that in a Schwarzenegger movie, to me, it doesn't feel like as over the top as what some of his other movies, but yet it still carries all the intensity of it. And it's all, like we've said, it's the Expendables before the Expendables. Everybody's like, they've got everybody together. And you go, look, you had Schwarzenegger, you had Carl Weathers, Jesse Ventura. You had all those back then. Sonny Langdon,
Yeah.
as Billy. I love that movie. And then RoboCop. And not to mention Full Metal Jacket. Arlie Ermey, Matthew Modine, it's Kubrick's. It's pretty much my favorite Kubrick movie. And that whole opening sequence when they're on, is it not Ellis Island? I can't tell you what it is where they're training. Blank. Through the blank. But that whole, Arlie Ermey, that's got to be one of the greatest improvised sections where he's yelling them down at their like initiation when they first get in there. And sometimes I wonder with something like that, if they can't do it, I don't think they could do that today. Even in the timescape of when, if you're doing it back then, I don't think they could get away with doing that today, just because the landscape of what it is right now.
The rules and regulations and everything are so much stricter now that you're thinking there's no way that's happening anymore.
But it's just such a great movie, and it's also got a good soundtrack that goes along with it too, and kind of captures that Vietnam era. And I think kind of lives on a little bit longer. Everybody when they go back to Vietnam era movies, they always talk Platoon. I kind of gravitate more to Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah, I think I'm in the Platoon regime. I don't remember Full Metal Jacket all that. I do remember seeing it, and what's his name again?
Arlie Ermey.
Arlie Ermey. I remember he was the biggest thing I remember from that movie, and he's another one who's going to be missed. He's another one we lost recently.
Yeah.
And but yeah, he's the main thing I remember from that. Wasn't Vince also in there? Vince Vaughn.
Vincent D'Onofrio.
D'Onofrio, that's who I was thinking of, yeah.
I must be a psycho because the more I'm thinking about it, every single movie I keep talking about has somebody that has some major turn in themselves from being good to bad. I'm starting to worry a little bit now.
I worry about you every episode.
It's a good thing we don't record side by side very often.
That's right.
So what we got next?
All right, for my number one movie year, and this is always on the list for best movie years, is 1984. And it's hard to go against a year where you have Ghostbusters, which, 34 years ago today, was released in theater, so happy anniversary. Beverly Hills Cop, you have Gremlins and The Terminator. And The Karate Kid. Those are huge movies coming out that year. But then if you look a little closer, you have movies like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which I'm sure was a big one that year. The Natural, with Robert Redford. Great movie. Doug's favorite sports movie, one of his top ones. For me, I loved Val Kilmer and Top Secret. Just a corny little throwaway movie, but it was so goofy that I'm always going to remember it and watch it. But Red Dawn, one of the bloodiest movies of all time for quite a while.
Yeah.
Had the highest kill number, and Marvel was represented that year with Conan the Destroyer.
Was it?
So Conan was in that year, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think he's in every year that we've mentioned.
Yeah.
He was probably in 1939. I just didn't notice him.
It's kind of funny because you look back at it, and you could pick any one of those movies out as being, like the dominant movie, because that's the thing that gets me about 84 is the longevity of it. To this day, like we were talking about Ghostbusters, you go back and watch Ghostbusters to this day, it is my favorite comedy of all time, but yet it's a little scary at times. I give it credit for, running that balance of being, has some scary moments to it, has great special effects still that hold up. And, I love Beverly Hills Cop. I loved Eddie Murphy.
That's a great movie.
We talk about through his first 4 movies. Who's maybe had as good of a first 4 movies than Eddie Murphy, and a worse last 20.
Yeah, bad run after.
And you talked about The Natural. I love The Natural for being almost like a fairy tale. But what stands out to me most about The Natural is the cinematography of it and how well it looks.
Right.
Because it is beautiful, especially when Glenn Close stands up.
With the sunlight behind her and the white dress.
Yes.
And you can see the pollen in the air or something, whatever it is. You can see the dust in the air, and it just gives it that ephemeral look.
It does, and my number one is also 1984. We're both kids of the 80s, so we're always going to be, for better or worse, we're going to be stuck in the 80s.
Usually for worse.
Yeah. But, there's so many ones that just kind of touch your heart. Mm-hmm. And like The Last Starfighter. It is as close to a Spielberg movie, have the feel of a Spielberg movie without being a Spielberg movie. And I always think, I love it for what it is, and I usually don't like to have remakes come out.
Right.
But it's the one movie I want to see get remade.
It's on one of our podcasts, we talked about movies that need to be remade, and I picked The Last Starfighter because it's a great story, especially for kids nowadays that love their video games. And what's better than being great at a video game than being chosen to go into a different galaxy to defend this universe against an evil army just because you're great at a certain game. But the special effects do not hold up in the original Last Starfighter, and you can say they do, but it looks like horrible computer graphics from the early 80s. So if you fix that up, it could be another big hit.
I think they stand up.
They don't stand up.
I think it's an early, and I do believe that was some of the stuff with Pixar actually helped with some of the rendering and stuff on that too. So, we maybe get a very early infancy of Pixar.
Very early.
And I could be wrong too.
I'm hoping you're wrong because that's pretty bad.
We talk about Last Starfighter, and I always try to think, who would you recast? And I don't know who I would recast. The Lance Guest is Alex Rogan. But I want to see Nathan Lane play Centauri. I think he's the one guy that we could get to do it.
He would be a good one. I thought you were going with Nathan Fillion at first, and I could be happy with him too.
If there's any remake with Nathan Fillion, it's got to be Firefly.
Oh, well, yeah.
We got to have a Serenity. We got to have that come back.
Serenity 2 Electric Boogaloo.
That is almost perfect. So, we're about ready to wrap this up. What have you watched? Is there anything lately that you've watched that you want everybody to see?
Well, everybody needs to give Solo a chance. I did enjoy that, and I've heard negative reviews, but if you just take it as a fun Star Wars story, and it doesn't have to always be Empire Strikes Back, then I thought it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed seeing the meeting of Chewie and Han, but I say give it a shot. Don't listen to the critics right now. Go see it and just have fun.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I went and saw it too, and they managed to make a very good Star Wars movie that doesn't feel 100% like a Star Wars movie,
right,
but has it in the right spots. They didn't seem like they were trying to make these huge moments, but they seemed to hit the ones that mattered. I love Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian, and the whole seeing the ship younger, younger, newer. I really like that, and I agree with you. If anybody hasn't seen it and is holding off, they need to go see it. And I'll put one other little one in, Greatest Showman on DVD or Blu-ray.
I just purchased that recently, but I haven't watched it yet, so that's coming up.
Jeremy, you must watch it.
To be continued.
Yes, on the next episode. And if you guys would like to get a hold of us ever, you guys can email us, moviemadnesspodcast@gmail.com. You can call our voicemail, which is 260-573-0015. You can tweet to us at Movie Madness Pod, or head on over to our Facebook page, which is also at Movie Madness Pod. One other place you can find us, the Ultimate Movie Geeks community on Facebook now. Was on Google+, now it's on Facebook. But you can find us there. And for all of us over here at the Movie Madness Podcast, Craig's not here, but you could find him third row from the screen, front and center.
And I'll be 2 rows behind him throwing popcorn at him.
Night, everybody.
Good night, movie lovers.
Wherever you are.
For updates about upcoming SMG Podcast Marathons, follow us on Twitter at SMG Pods, on Facebook at Southgate Media Group, or go to our website and sign up for our email list at southgatemediagroup.com. Thanks again for listening.